What if her silence is not a withdrawal but a sacred echo in the vast cathedral of your becoming? What if love, in its most mysterious form, doesn't rush in with answers, but steps back like the tide, trusting that the moon will pull you toward your own depth? We often imagine affection as noise, as affirmation, as constant presence. But sometimes love is absent, and absence is the most faithful companion of growth. You see, the universe doesn't always roar. It often whispers. It rearranges its stars in silence. And maybe, just maybe, her stillness is not rejection, but reverence, an unseen alignment in the greater symphony that plays beneath the surface of what we call understanding. In this dance of souls, every pause has purpose. Every shadow holds its light. And in the quiet, if you truly listen, you'll hear the whole cosmos breathing with you, because you have always been part of its design. But you see, love is not always a hand reaching toward you. Sometimes it is a hand releasing you. And that release, so misunderstood, so quickly labeled as indifference, is often the most sacred offering of all. You may believe that if she loves you, she should be ever present, devoted, orbiting your world like the sun in the sky. But life, as it truly is, doesn't unfold that way. The deepest growth doesn't happen under the constant gaze of another. It happens in the quiet corners, in the unseen hours when we are left alone with the rawness of our becoming. We speak of love as possession far too often. We want someone to wrap around us like a blanket to soothe every insecurity with immediate attention. But that kind of love, though sweet, is not the kind that frees. And there are women, souls, who love not from need, but from knowing that their absence is not abandonment, but a necessary doorway through which your spirit must pass. It's easy to trust affection when it's loud, when it texts back, when it waits outside your door, when it affirms, reassures, repeats your name like a chant. But what about the love that trusts you enough to let go? What about the love that understands your journey is not hers to shape, but to witness? From afar, in stillness, what if her stepping back is not the vanishing of love, but the expansion of it? There are seasons in every sacred bond, just as there are seasons in the natural world. The tree does not mourn when the leaves fall. It knows they must, so that spring may come again. And so too does she step away, not because her heart has grown cold, but because something in you is ready to unfold today, and her nearness would only delay that becoming. You must understand, distance in love is not always a rupture. Sometimes it is rhythm. Think of the breath, how it must exhale to make room for the inhale. Think of the waves, how they recede before they return. This is the dance of everything that is alive. So why should love be any different? And if she loves you deeply, truly, she may feel when her presence would only create dependence. She may intuit that you must stand for a while without her to remember how to walk on your own. Not because you are unworthy, but because your worth was never hers to define. Her silence becomes a gift then, though it may arrive wrapped in longing. Of course the mind rebels. It wants reasons. It wants signs, certainty, explanations. But the soul speaks in symbols. It understands that sometimes love does not speak. It waits, not out of cruelty, but out of trust in the intelligence of your path. And if you listen, really listen, not with your ears, but with your being, you'll hear the stillness hum. You'll begin to feel how her absence is not a wall, but a wind pushing you gently toward your own wholeness. The people who leave space in our lives are often the ones who believe we are capable of filling it with something divine. And when she steps back, when she turns inward, when she chooses quiet over clinging, it may not be because her love has died, but because it has matured. She may love you so profoundly that she refuses to interrupt the sacred process of your becoming. And in doing so, she becomes not just a lover, but a silent architect of your unfolding. So when she ignores you, don't rush to judge, to fear, to chase. Just pause, breathe, watch. Because in that sacred space between her silence and your reaction lies the very heartbeat of the universe. And it is whispering, be still, and you will know. We often misunderstand silence. We treat it like a void, as though it's something lacking, something broken. But silence, when you begin to understand its language, is anything but empty. It's a presence so full, so profound, it surpasses the need for words. And when she loves you, truly deeply, she may fall into silence, not because she's absent, but because she's listening to something beyond the surface. To ignore is not always to reject. Sometimes it is to respect the sacredness of space. Now we're conditioned to believe that communication is the lifeblood of love. That if she isn't talking, isn't responding, isn't texting back within minutes, The bond must be fading, but that's a very small view of connection. Because real love, the kind that is rooted in wisdom rather than fear, doesn't always show up in the ways we expect. It doesn't need to constantly announce itself to be true. In fact, sometimes the most loving act is to step back, to say nothing, to let the silence speak for itself, and not in coldness, but in trust, in reverence for the invisible unfolding of things. There's a kind of spiritual intelligence in that, a deep knowing that presence is not always physical, and love does not always rush in to soothe every discomfort. You see, in the stillness, something begins to rise to the surface. Not chaos, but clarity. Not abandonment, but awareness. When she grows quiet, she may be inviting you, not pushing you away, but pulling you inward, into yourself, into the space where you begin to hear your own voice without the echo of another. And in that space, you don't just discover her love. You discover your own soul. We live in a world obsessed with noise. We fill every moment with distraction, chatter, validation. But love, in its most refined form, often lives in the quiet spaces between words. It's in the way she breathes when you speak. It's in the way she walks away to give you room to grow. And sometimes, it's in the way she chooses not to explain, not to justify, but to allow the silence to carry the truth she cannot say. Silence, then, becomes a form of communication more ancient than language. It's the way the stars speak to the night, the way trees grow without ever making a sound. And if she loves you in this way, with a silence that doesn't seek attention, she may be loving you from a place beyond personal desire, from a space where love is not about possessing but witnessing. Of course, this kind of silence is unsettling to the ego, the part of us that craves assurance, that wants affection to be obvious and tangible. But the soul knows better. The soul hears what the mind cannot. And if you allow yourself to stop searching for signals, if you sit with her silence instead of fighting it, you'll begin to understand that it is not the absence of love. It is its refinement. So maybe, when she ignores you, she is trusting the silence to do what words cannot, to carve a deeper understanding, deeper alignment, one that doesn't need to be spoken to be known. And maybe she's holding that space for you, not because she's indifferent, but because she sees you. Not just who you are, but who you are becoming. And she knows that sometimes becoming requires silence. The truth is, love doesn't always rush in with answers. Sometimes it waits in the stillness and watches who you become in the quiet. And that waiting, that wordless, watchful grace may be the loudest kind of love you'll ever know. Because what speaks most clearly is not always the voice, but the space left behind for you to listen. There's a strange and subtle moment in all of this, when she grows distant and you begin to feel the tug within yourself. That ache, that tightening in the chest, a sudden silence that echoes louder than any argument could. And your first instinct almost always is to reach for her, to chase, unfold, to fix, to demand her attention like it's some life-giving breath you've been denied. But what you're really reaching for isn't her. It's your own comfort, your own validation, the tender and wounded part of the ego that says, I must be seen to be real. You see, the ego doesn't like being ignored. Oh, it interprets silence as an insult, a slight, a threat. It wants affirmation, feedback, constant reminders that it matters. But the soul is quiet. It listens differently. It doesn't need the noise. And if you allow yourself to drop into that deeper awareness, you begin to realize that her ignoring you isn't necessarily about you. It may be a mirror, one she didn't even know she was holding up. A mirror that shows you all the parts of yourself still looking outward for meaning. All the parts that believe your worth is defined by whether or not she turns toward you in any given moment. And that's where the real lesson lives. Not in the ache of being overlooked, but in what that ache reveals. So many of us confuse love with constant reassurance. We believe that if someone loves us, they should always make us feel good. That their role is to complete the story we've been writing in our heads. But real love doesn't pamper the ego. It awakens the soul. And sometimes that awakening comes through discomfort, through confusion, through silence, through being ignored not out of cruelty but out of a greater rhythm moving through the relationship, one that neither of you may fully understand in the moment. Now, this isn't to say that neglect or indifference is noble. No. But when someone you know once moved with love suddenly grows still, it's worth asking not just what they're doing, but what it's stirring within you. Because often the fear isn't that they've stopped loving you. The fear is that without their attention, you might stop loving yourself. That's the edge where transformation begins, where the ego trembles and the soul starts to rise. Her silence becomes a kind of initiation, an invitation to meet yourself where no one else can accompany you. And if you resist that silence, if you only seek to end it to restore the comfort, you may miss the very thing it came to show you. The truth is, some of the greatest turning points in life don't come with grand revelations. They come in moments when no one is watching, when no one replies, when the room is quiet and you're left with the flickering candle of your own awareness. That's when you begin to see. You were never waiting for her. You were waiting for yourself to arrive. It's a strange grace, really. To be ignored just long enough to realize you've been ignoring your own death. To want someone's love so badly that you finally remember your own. And in that remembering, the need to chase dissolves. Not because you no longer care, but because you finally understand that real love doesn't always come dressed in presence. Sometimes it wears absence. Sometimes it walks away just far enough for you to find your own feet. And maybe, just maybe, that's not the end of something. Maybe it's the beginning. Because when the ego falls quiet and the soul opens its eyes, you no longer need to be seen to feel whole. You simply are. So here you are wondering what went wrong, wondering why she's not calling, not reaching out, not weaving herself into your world the way she once did. And it's tempting, isn't it, to see it all as some grand rejection? To assume the worst, to label her absence as an ending, rather than a movement. But life is not that straightforward. It rarely speaks in lines. It speaks in spirals. And what feels like a door closing may, in time, reveal itself as a redirection, a curve in the road that leads you not away from love, but deeper into it. You see, in the great unfolding of existence, things don't always make sense right away. The most beautiful patterns, the galaxies, the tides, the seasons emerge from cycles, not straight paths. And love, real love, follows the same law. It doesn't unfold in one continuous rhythm. It pauses. It hesitates. It retreats and returns much like the moon. Not to confuse you, but to attune you to the rhythms beyond your understanding. And so when she grows quiet, when she lets go of the thread that once tied her closely to your daily life, it might not be because the love has vanished. It might be because something deeper is moving her, or you, or both. Perhaps she sees what you cannot yet see. That the love you shared was only one movement in a much larger symphony. And maybe, just maybe, the silence is not hers alone. Maybe the universe is speaking through her absence. There are forces at play in your life far greater than your immediate desires. There are invisible hands guiding you toward experiences you would never choose but absolutely need. We tend to see the events of our lives as random, chaotic, even cruel. But what if everything, even her silence, is part of a sacred choreography? What if you're not being rejected but rerouted? Sometimes the soul requires silence to align with its purpose. Sometimes you're pulled away from what you want in order to discover what you are. And love, as strange as it may sound, often gets out of the way to make room for this discovery. Her ignoring you might not be the sign of something dying, but the seed of something trying to be born. And it isn't always about her. That's the illusion. We get so wrapped in decoding someone else's actions that we miss the quiet miracle happening inside us. Her withdrawal might be the catalyst your spirit needed. It may be clearing space not for another person, but for another version of yourself. One that doesn't just react, but reflects. One that sees love not as something to grasp, but as something to become. We forget so easily that our lives are woven into something vast, a great living tapestry that we can't fully perceive. Each thread, each silence, each ache and unanswered question is part of that design. Her distance, as painful as it may feel now, could be the very force calling you to wake up, to rise, to step into your life not as someone waiting to be chosen, but as someone who is already a part of the cosmic dance. So instead of asking why she's not there, ask what her absence is making space for. Instead of chasing the noise, lean into the quiet and feel the way the universe is rearranging itself around you. Not against you, but for you. And if you really listened, not with your ears, but with your presence, you'll begin to sense that this moment, this very moment, is not a mistake, but a message. Because in this great cosmic dance, not everything that disappears is lost. Some things must leave the frame so the larger picture can be revealed. And if you have the courage to let go, to trust, to open, you just might find that her silence was never empty. It was the sound of the stars aligning.